The time has come. The people have spoken. This is the ultimate IO guide. Spell builds, item builds, strategies, tips, tricks, we're covering it all. By the end of this, everyone will want you on their team. I've broken things up into very clear sections for your convenience. We'll cover the basics and dive into the nerdy stuff to bring your IO gameplay to the next level. Stay tethered to your screen, because by the end of this guide, I'm going to overcharge your gameplay, lift your spirits with a win streak, and make you so excited you'll relocate your cursor straight to the subscribe button. Was that clever or cringe? Meet Io, the Wisp. Io excels at keeping teammates healthy on the battlefield, buffing them to exceed their normal strength and providing a global presence that offers many unique strategic advantages. Io has proven itself to be a powerhouse in the competitive Dota 2 scene, often being a highly contested pick or ban. This is largely due to the almost necessary high-level communication that professional teams are able to maintain, allowing them to utilize Io's toolkit to its fullest potential. This is why so many people struggle with playing Io in pub games. The level of communication is typically much more interesting.
Cancel, блядь! Cancel! Cancel! Are you okay?
Io is my absolute favorite hero for many reasons, and I admit it can be hard to play. But with my over 2,600 games on Io and somewhere around rank 20 on DotaBuff's leaderboards, I'm going to guide you down the path to being the best Io player in your bracket and show you why this hero is so fun and powerful. Also, this video is focused on Io support, but we're going to cover lots of mechanics and interactions that'll be useful no matter which role you play Io in. First, we'll cover Io's innate ability, then move on to its spells, Tether, Spirits, Overcharge, and Relocate. We'll discuss Io's facets when we cover Overcharge since they're directly related. Next, we'll go over item builds, skill builds, and talents. We'll wrap up with how to play Io during the laning phase and the rest of the game, and finally Io's pairings and counters. And again, these sections are broken up into chapters so you can skip around as you please. Without further ado, let's play Io. Io's innate is Sightseer. This allows Io's team to take 1 second less to take watchers, and their watchers have 300 bonus vision. Wow. I'll be honest, this is not a very great innate, unfortunately. The quicker capture time is nice, but not necessary at all, and doesn't offer much to Io or its teammates for most of the game. The bonus vision is cool on paper, but looking at the position of watchers on the map, the 300 bonus vision doesn't give any significant advantage in any of these areas. It provides more vision of some nearby neutral camps, but the enemy is never going to continue farming under the vision of an enemy watcher. They'll just capture it before or right after farming the camp. It might be cool if watchers gave some range of true sight, or if watchers weren't capturable by enemies for some time. Or since Tether is such a key part of Io's toolkit, maybe make that the innate. Just some ideas. Now let's move on to Io's spells. Tether is the heart of Io's kit, and although it seems simple, there are a lot of small details to it that you might not know. The super quick elevator pitch for what Tether does is, it links Io to an ally, granting them bonus movement speed and heals, while damaging and reducing enemies' attack and movement speed if they touch the link. It also allows Io to grant the benefits of its other spells to its tethered ally. We'll go more over those later when we talk about Io's facets, but for now, just know that pretty much everything starts with Tether. Tether can be used on an ally hero or a creep, but not buildings or couriers. It can also be used on targetable creep hero units like Warlock's Golem and Lone Druid Spirit Bear. Tether has no set duration. It'll break only when exceeding the break distance, which we'll go over in a moment, when Io or the tethered ally dies, when affected by an ally dismember, or when using the break tether sub ability. It doesn't break if tethered to Lifestealer and he infests his teammates, or even if he infests Io. There are a few different rules and restrictions that you should be familiar with when it comes to the tether link distance. First, Tether has a cast range of 1600, which is pretty large. If Io's tether target is 700 units or further away, Io will be pulled towards them at a speed of 1000 until coming within 300 range of them. If the ally were to continue moving away from Io while Io is being pulled, Io will continue being pulled until it's within 300 range of the ally. This allows Io to be pulled over impassable terrain and through trees. If the pull ends near trees, it'll destroy any directly around Io. The pull gets interrupted when Io gets stunned, hexed, hidden, feared, or rooted. Taunts, leashes, and silences do not interrupt the pulling. If you're jumped and leashed by Slark, for example, you can tether a way to break the leash. Now, although Io gets pulled into its ally if the range between the two is greater than 700, the max distance Tether can reach before it breaks is actually 1000. And a fun little visual detail, if the link distance gets to 700, the color changes, and getting to 800 makes the link jiggle. This has no actual effect on Tether, it's just eye candy. There's an interesting point I want to make here that some of you may have noticed or experienced in your games. If the distance between Io and the tether target becomes greater than 2150 while Io is being pulled, the pull ends and the tether breaks. This is most common when your ally uses Blink Dagger or a Blink ability. So PSA to everyone who has an Io on their team. If Io tethers you and is being pulled towards you, don't blink too far away or the tether will break. When Io tethers to an ally, that ally is granted bonus movement speed. Then Io's base movement speed is set equal to that ally's buffed movement speed. So they move at the same speed. This is why Io players typically never buy boots, because they don't need to. They'll often be tethered to an ally for most of the game anyway. We'll go over item builds later and discuss this further. If the tethered ally has their movement speed slowed, Io will still maintain that ally's movement speed before the slow was applied. If Io has its movement speed slowed while tethered to an ally, it will reduce Io's movement speed, even though the tethered ally's movement speed is the same. If Io's speed is faster than the tethered ally's after the bonus movement speed from Tether, Io's speed will be reduced to match the ally. This doesn't apply if Io is hasted though. While tethered, Io cannot exceed the maximum movement speed limit, even if the tethered ally does. For example, Spirit Breaker charging or Bloodseeker with Thirst. Oddly, this seems to be true even if Io has Force Boots, which is supposed to completely remove the speed limit for the wearer. Bug or misunderstanding by me? Not really sure. Now I want to emphasize with some examples the biggest strength of Tether, the healing. When Io restores health or mana, the tethered ally gains a portion of that amount depending on the level of tether. A level 3 tether will offer a 1-to-1 exact match of healing. So if Io heals for 100, the tethered ally would also heal for 100. A level 4 tether actually exceeds that and provides more healing to the tethered ally than even Io receives. So that 100 heal to Io would heal the tethered ally for 120. But this is where it gets really good. Let's say Io has level 4 tether, which has a 1.2 multiplier for healing, and a mech which heals for 275. If Io tethers the ally and uses mech, the 275 heal for mech is amped by the 1.2 multiplier from tether, so it healed for 330 instead. But it doesn't end there. And a quick note, it says here 338 instead of 330. That's just because there was a constant healing of 8 being applied from Tether and Io's natural health regen. So in this healing tick, it bundled the 330 with that 8. The ally unit also receives the normal 275 heal that mech offers, just like it would to any other surrounding allies. So in the end, the tethered ally was healed for 605 compared to the 275 from a normal mech usage. This is a huge burst of heals that's capable of turning the tide in a teamfight. This is why mech is so great on Io. But wait, what if you have a Holy Locket, which amplifies healing by 30%? Well, this gets to be pretty nutty. Look at this. In the same scenario we had before, the heal to surrounded units from a mech is amped by 30%, and the self-heal on Io from mech is also amped by 30%. Then the amount the tethered ally heals for is also amped by 30%. So a normal heal for mech is 275. To a tethered ally, the heal is 605. To a tethered ally, while Io has Holy Locket, the heal is 915. Combo this with any other healing items or even substitute mech with Guardian Greaves, which heals for more, and the amount of healing Io can offer in a split second is insane. And important to note here, it does not matter if Io is full HP or not. Either way, using mech will still heal for the full amount, regardless of how much HP Io actually gained from it. We could check out tons of other spells and item healing combos, but I won't do that here. I instead encourage you to head into demo mode and test things out for yourself. I only show this one example to emphasize the strength of Tether so you know how it actually works. I also want to make note of how much mana Io can restore to teammates, which is also a huge part of Tether. It uses the same transfer values as the healing, so a max Tether will give 120% of the mana to the tethered ally. Let's say you, as Io, have Arcane Boots and your Storm Spirit needs some mana. Arcane Boots on their own restores 175 mana to allies. If you use a level 4 Tether on him, then use your Arcane Boots, you'll be giving him 385 mana instead. The Arcane Ring neutral item gives 65 mana to allies. Using this on a tethered ally with a max tether would give them 143 mana. Not too bad. Keeping your teammates healthy with all resources, health, and mana is crucial as it allows them to continue playing out on the map and getting the most of it. Last couple of notes on Tether. If an enemy is in contact with the link between Io and its ally, the enemy will have their movement and attack speed slowed, as well as receive a bit of magic damage per second. This can be great to keep an enemy from running away too fast, allowing your tethered ally to beat into them. You don't have to recast Tether if you level it up while it's active. Simply leveling it up will start applying the benefits of the new current level. If Io's tethered ally is invisible, enemies can only see a fake tether leading to the invisible unit's last known location. This works the same way around if Io is invisible. It'll show a fake tether leading to Io's last known location to the enemies. This is also how it works if Io or its tethered target is in Fog of War. Io's second ability, Spirits, offers offensive capabilities as well as a way to farm. When used, 5 spirit balls are summoned around Io, one by one. If a spirit collides with an enemy hero, it explodes, dealing magic damage to enemies in a 360 radius around the explosion. Here's how big that radius is. If a spirit collides with a creep, it will not explode. Instead, it'll simply damage them for a lesser amount than it deals when exploding. The spirits last for 19 seconds. After this time, they'll explode, each dealing the same amount of damage as they would if colliding with an enemy hero. You can utilize this to deal a large burst of damage to an enemy or creeps. It's a great way to farm by quickly blowing up a neutral camp or creep wave. When spirits are active, Io gains 2 sub-abilities, Spirits In and Spirits Out. These are used to move the spirits closer or further away from Io. Both can be toggled on and off, and you can stop them at any point, not just at the maximum or minimum distance from Io. Spirits provide 3 seconds of flying vision in a 150 radius at the location where they collided with a hero. They do not give vision if they explode due to expiring, recasting spirits, colliding with creeps, and don't give vision when flying around like normal. The flying vision they give when colliding with an enemy hero is a great way to scout enemies in trees, especially finding Monkey King on trees, or checking high grounds and cliffs. When Spirits is cast, the spirits automatically move to the furthest distance away from Io, 650. This distance cannot be increased by cast range items like Aether Lens, but it can be by items that grant an AoE bonus like Bloodstone. If Io is smoked while spirits are active, it will hide the spirits from enemies. They'll become visible once the smoke breaks. If Io becomes invisible while spirits are active, the spirits will have the same vision rules as a hero. So if you have true sight of an area, you'll see the invisible Io spirits, even if you don't see the invisible Io. However, scouting the invis spirits doesn't work with dust. Using spirits, Spirits In or Spirits Out while invisible will break your invisibility. If an enemy Io is in Fog of War, but has spirits in vision that you see, you will see the spirits, which can give away the Io's position. Be aware of not giving away your position in this way if you're playing Io. Here is how much total magic damage the 5 spirits can deal before reductions at each level of spirits. Io has a talent which increases the spirit's hero damage. After acquiring this talent, here is how much total damage spirits can do when exploding on a target. Spirits will hit and explode on invisible enemy heroes. This can be a great way to scout incoming threats. Spirits do not explode on illusions of heroes, they'll instead just do damage as they pass through them like they do to creeps. This is a great way to help quickly identify which illusion is the real hero. Be sure to make your team aware by spam pinging or talking on the mic, as they might not know this mechanic. Since spirits last for a while, it can be a good idea to use them before you TP out of base, or right after your TP finishes, so you can recover most of the mana from the fountain regen, since that lingers after your TP finishes. This tip involves Io's ultimate, Relocate, which we'll go over later, but I thought now would be a good time to throw this in. If you're planning on using Relocate, consider using spirits a bit before you relocate, so once you do, you can use your already existing spirits on an enemy, then spawn new ones for additional damage in your gank or teamfight. Io's Aghanim Scepter upgrade passively spawns spirits around Io constantly every second, up to the normal maximum amount of 5. It also applies a 15% movement speed slow to any enemies in a spirit explosion for 0.3 seconds. If a spirit explodes by colliding with an enemy hero, a new spirit will spawn to replace the exploded one. You can press your spirit's hotkey, the same one you'd press to spawn them normally without an Ag Scepter, to instantly explode existing spirits. This is typically an item for when Io is played as a core, as it allows Io to deal a lot more damage throughout a long fight, which is the type of fight Io likes to take. There's also a really interesting mechanic with this that isn't specified in game, and it's extremely easy to miss. If you have all spirits spawned and you hit an enemy hero with one, making it explode, it will actually explode 2 spirits at that location. This is because with the Ag Scepter, the spirits respawn right away, so when the spirit explodes, it actually explodes the second one that was about to spawn as well. This only works on the first spirit if you already have all spirits spawned, so you can actually get the damage output of 6 spirits instead of 5. Here are some tips for using spirits. The first spirit always spawns to the north of Io, and all spirits rotate clockwise. This means if you want to hit an enemy as soon as possible with a spirit, be sure they're somewhere in this region from Io. The next spirit always spawns behind the previous one, or where it would be if it already exploded. If you're ever in a situation where you want to deal damage quickly to an enemy, move around the enemy in a counterclockwise motion, so the spirits will hit them quicker. If you rotate clockwise, it won't really work as well. Also, it can help to move the spirits as close to Io as possible with the spirits in sub ability, so they'll all hit the enemy in a very short amount of time. I know a lot of people have trouble controlling the spirits, especially during the chaos of an engagement. The most obvious tip is to simply practice using and controlling them to hit a target. This could be as basic as practicing on a target dummy in demo mode, while moving around and in and out. I've played enough Io to the point where I don't even think about how to properly control my spirits. It's just second nature at this point. If you practice enough, you can get to this level of comfort as well. Io's third ability, Overcharge, buffs up Io in various significant ways, increasing its survivability along with its offensive and defensive capabilities, depending on the chosen facet, which we'll also cover in this section. The buffs Overcharge offers are shared with Io's tethered ally, which is a primary way you'll be utilizing this spell. This is where we need to go over Io's facets as they affect what Overcharge offers. Io's 2 facets are Kritzkrieg and Metagun. Kritzkrieg is the more offensive facet, offering bonus attack speed and spell amp to Io and its tethered ally while Overcharge is active. Metagun is the defensive facet, instead offering armor and magic resistance while Overcharge is active. Now the big question is, which one is better? I don't typically like giving definitive answers like this in a game like Dota, where there are so many factors to take into account. But to simplify your viewing experience and help you decide which facet to take, I do think Kritzkrieg is in most cases the better option, and here's why. The spell amp and more importantly the attack speed from Kritzkrieg can be used to of course make your tethered ally deadlier in a fight, but it also helps your ally farm faster, whereas the armor and magic resistance from Metagun are only really useful during a fight. They're not going to help you farm faster at all. For this reason alone, Kritzkrieg is usually better. You can just get a lot more use out of it throughout the whole game, while you're fighting and downtimes while you're farming. Metagun's use is only really when fighting. Also, if we look at what both facets offer, it's a lot easier to substitute what Metagun offers, armor and magic resistance, with items you can buy in the shop. It's a lot harder to buy items that'll grant your ally bonus attack speed and spell amp. What Kritzkrieg offers also pairs really well with a lot of IO pairings, which is a section we'll go over later. For example, Gyro, Luna, Leshrac, all of these heroes get a lot of value out of the bonus attack speed and spell amp. So yes, I do think as of now Kritzkrieg is better, and it seems that's what most high ranked players think as well. That being said, I think it's always important to consider your options. Sometimes you might not have cores that can utilize what Kritzkrieg offers, and maybe the enemy has a lot of physical and or magic damage, so Metagun might be more fitting. Or maybe you predict that your enemy won't have any damage problems and the only real issue you'll face is surviving fights. My point is, try to keep an open mind and be ready to try new things if they seem fitting. Now let's go over some more mechanics and strats for Overcharge. With Kritzkrieg, Overcharge provides Spell Amp. This will increase the damage of your spirits as well as Tether. Try to remember this before using spirits to output the most damage possible. Regardless of the facet you choose, Overcharge provides bonus health regen based on the unit's max HP. The tankier your tethered ally is, the more health they'll regen during Overcharge. And that works for IO as well. So the tankier you are as IO, the more health you'll regen during Overcharge, meaning you'll heal your tethered ally for even more. This means it's especially useful later in the game when your teammates get really tanky, but it can also be a great way to provide some additional heals in the laning phase. As mentioned earlier, Overcharge with the first facet, which grants bonus attack speed, is a great farming tool. Don't hesitate to use it to help your teammate farm, especially if you're trying to clear a camp quickly so a new one can spawn. A note on this as well, standing so the neutral camp is between you and your tethered ally can help to kill it faster and easier since tether does damage and slows their attack speed. This is most useful to do when killing a stacked camp. Hopefully you don't steal any of the last hits with your tether or your teammate might get tilted. We all know how those silly core players are, not liking us supports to get any last hits. Lastly, we need to go over IO's Aghanim shard, which upgrades Overcharge. This upgrade now also grants slow resistance and spell lifesteal when Overcharge is active, which can both be applied to IO's tethered ally. The slow resistance is obviously great against lineups with a lot of AoE slow to help your teammates from getting kited. The spell lifesteal can be nice to combo with the damage from your spirits, especially if you take the spirit hero damage talent, but the big impact from your spell lifesteal comes from certain IO pairings. IO Leshrac is a super strong combo with this shard. Others include Gyro, Luna, even an IO Bristleback. All of these heroes can output a lot of damage with their spells. You'll hopefully usually get your shard from the Tormentor, but if you don't, it can in certain games be great to just buy. It mostly depends on whether you're in dire need of other items first, maybe a Glimmer to help keep you alive, and if it's fitting depending on the enemy heroes and your ally heroes. IO will only share the 10% spell lifesteal from Overcharge. The spell lifesteal won't be increased past that if IO has spell lifesteal items of its own. Last but certainly not least, Relocate. This allows IO to provide a global presence that opens up many different ways of playing the map, and also a way to save teammates from certain death. Relocate teleports IO and its tethered ally to any location on the map. They stay there for 12 seconds before IO returns with its tethered ally, or alone if no one is tethered. Although there can be many use cases, which we'll cover more later, there are two main ways Relocate is typically utilized, offensively and defensively. This seems to be a theme with IO as seen by the Facets. The offensive approach is to tether an ally and relocate them into a fight or to get a pick off. The defensive approach is to relocate an ally in danger to a safe location, typically straight back to the base by double-clicking Relocate or off to the side of a fight so they can rejoin. When IO casts Relocate, there's a delay, more like a windup, before it actually goes off. In this time, there's an indication on the minimap for both teams that shows exactly where IO is relocating to. This is similar to the indication given when Roshan's banner is placed, which also shows for both teams. I've noticed that a lot of people are not aware of this minimap indication, which leads to unnecessary deaths. So if you're playing against IO, I recommend being hyper aware of your minimap once IO gets level 6. This can be an extremely easy way to dodge an incoming relocate gank. When IO relocates, there's a little timer above IO that shows how long until IO will return where it relocated from. This little timer is visible for both teams. IO can relocate clones, illusions, and creep heroes like Warlock's Golem and Lone Druid Spirit Bear. When IO uses Relocate, it grants 300 radius flying vision at the targeted point, as well as a visual indication on the ground. This can also be seen by both teams, so keep an eye out for this too when against an IO. There's a visual indication on the ground where IO relocated from as well, which is where IO will return after the 12-second duration of Relocate's teleport. There is a lot of strategy to using Relocate effectively. I'm going to go over some tips, but if you want additional tips, check out this other IO video I made that covers some of my favorites that I think a lot of people aren't using. Like mentioned earlier, you can double tap Relocate to start relocating to your fountain. This is how you'll typically use it, and it's the safest way to relocate if you're new to IO. Back in the day, this double tap mechanic didn't exist. You actually had to click on your fountain on the minimap, which could lead to game losing misplays. Things are a lot easier nowadays. When you start Relocate, IO has a buff that shows when Relocate will complete. Use this to be sure you're tethered to an ally before the buff ends. A quick tip: if you don't anticipate you'll need Relocate anytime soon, and it seems safe enough, you can use Relocate to yoink the enemy Wisdom Rune. Before Relocate finishes, in the time when it's winding up and you have this buff above showing when it'll complete, Relocate can be cancelled by an enemy if IO is Cycloned, Hexed, Rooted, Stunned, Slept, or Silenced. IO cannot cancel Relocate by itself unless one of these effects is self-applied with something like a Yule Scepter or Pigpole. If Relocate completes, the return from Relocate after 12 seconds cannot be cancelled by anything except death. Relocate can still be started while rooted, but won't complete if IO is still rooted. If IO is hidden by something like Odie's Astral or is eaten by Pudge with his shard, IO will return to the same return location after exiting those hidden states. So trying to save your ally IO in this way will not work. What will work is if you use Kunkka's X on IO before returning, so you can bring IO right back. Also, if IO is being pulled towards Pudge by his hook at the same time IO is supposed to return from Relocate, IO will land at Pudge's hook location. This can be used to save your ally IO or to bring back an enemy IO to kill them. Let's talk about the strategy behind using Relocate, since this is something a lot of people struggle with, specifically when using it offensively. Mastering Relocate makes your enemies hesitate and changes how they play the map. The constant threat of a Relocate gank should keep them on edge, but how do you use it effectively? When and where should you use it? In the middle of a fight? On the side? Near your team? Or behind the enemy? To effectively use Relocate, you need a solid understanding of the game. This includes knowing your team's strength, the enemy's strength, key targets in fights, and coordination with your team. Successful Relocate usage relies more on game knowledge than the ability itself. If you don't understand your team's and the enemy's strengths, your Relocate usage may fail or be ineffective, and it might end up feeding an ally to the enemy or using Relocate when it's not needed. Good Relocate usage requires extensive game knowledge. Instead of diving into all possible scenarios, I'll share some key points you should be considering before relocating, so you can get the absolute most out of it. For more detailed insights into specific situations, come by my streams where I often play IO, and you can ask me any questions you have. One of the biggest things to take into consideration before relocating is the position of the rest of your team, if they're needed. For example, if you're just wanting to relocate your carry to get a pick off on someone, you don't really need to consider your team's position. If you're relocating your carry into a team fight where you need, well, your team, you'll need to consider your team's position. Don't relocate in long before they'll arrive, or you'll probably get blown up. Don't relocate in too late, or they'll be dead by the time you arrive. Then you'll get blown up. Also be aware of your team's mobility items and abilities. For example, you know you have an axe with a blink. You see him approaching, so you feel safe relocating in, knowing he can blink in to back you up. Well, make sure his blink is actually ready to use. He might have used it while running toward the enemy, and it's still on cooldown. The goal usually is to attack at the same time as your team, so the enemy has to deal with multiple threats at once. If you go in one by one, the enemies will likely deal with you much easier. Next, consider big AoE spells like Static Storm, Black Hole, and Chronosphere before relocating. Against such spells, keep in mind their cooldowns. If they're available, relocate to the side of the fight, not directly on the enemy or your teammates. This way, you aren't caught right when you relocate in, and those not caught in the AoE can help the others. Another use for relocate is to push a lane rather than fighting, known as Rat Dota. This strategy, once very popular with IO, can still be viable if you have a good read on the game. If your team is weaker and waiting for key items, you can relocate a core to a side lane to push it out or to get tower damage if the lane is pushed up enough. Ensure your team agrees with this plan to avoid miscommunication and potential reports if they prefer to teamfight instead. Against heroes hiding behind their team, consider using Relocate to jump the enemy backlines. However, again, be mindful of your team's positioning. If your team isn't engaging the enemy front line, the enemy can quickly churn and deal with you first. When using Relocate to save an ally, remember the long windup time before it activates. Many IO players start Relocate too late, causing their teammates to die before it can go off. Understanding the enemy's damage output and your teammate's status is crucial for timing Relocate correctly. For example, if your carry runs into a fight with their BKB, you might need to start Relocate preemptively before their BKB ends, anticipating that they'll be locked down and killed. It helps to keep tabs on your teammates' items and abilities to know what tools they have to stay healthy and continue fighting. Alright, we've covered all of IO's spells: Tether, Spirits, Overcharge, Relocate, even IO's Facets. We've learned a lot so far, and although you might be feeling inspired to play IO and be the ultimate healer for your team, there's still some more to cover. Now that we're familiar with IO's spells, let's take a look at the order in which to level those spells. In Dota, there can be many viable ways to do something, and IO's skill build is no exception. I'll cover the two main skill builds for IO and explain when to prioritize one spell over another, helping you choose the best build for your game. We'll also discuss IO's talents at the end of this section. The first build maxes Tether and Overcharge, leaving Spirits for later or skipping it for stats to become tankier. This build focuses on healing and buffing yourself and your tethered ally. Max Tether with a 402 build if you aim to sustain damage and hit an early mech timing, keeping your team healthy for early teamfights and objectives. This is also good for drawn out teamfights where sustained healing is crucial. Max Overcharge first with a 204 build if you prioritize attack speed and farming efficiency over early healing. This works well in slower games or when your core benefits from attack speed or spell amp. For example, with an Ursa, the bonus attack speed makes pickoffs and teamfights much more threatening early on. With Metagun, a 204 build is also effective if you're not building an early mech and have a core like Leshrac who wants to run into enemies. The early bonus armor and magic resistance can catch enemies off guard. Try both builds and see which suits you best. If unsure, either build works, or even going 303. Spirits is usually skipped until later, but sometimes players skip it entirely for more stats. The second skill build, which back in my day used to be the go-to, is the Spirits build. This enhances offensive and farming capabilities with additional damage from Spirits. Typically this build is 1-4-1. You can then max Tether for more healing or Overcharge for increased spell amp, which increases Spirit's damage. This build best suits games where your team lacks early damage, your cores don't benefit much from Overcharge, or your team already has good sustain. Max Spirits actually provides noticeable damage in early engagements. This is also the preferred build for playing core IO. If you're new to IO, I recommend starting with one of the healer builds. They're straightforward, impactful, and you don't need to manage controlling spirits. Your gameplay will be focused on keeping yourself and your teammates alive while buffing them up. The item build for this is also simple, which we'll cover in the next section. Now let's talk about IO's talents and the reasoning behind choosing each one. The additional attack damage to IO's tethered ally at level 10 is the more popular choice. It boosts damage for fights and farming, making it a safe and generally useful talent. The alternative talent increases the enemy move and attack slow when touching tether. Choose the slow talent if you expect enemies to be in your tether during engagements. This is useful if your main tether partner is a hero that dives into enemies like Slardar, Phantom Assassin, or Ursa. It's also valuable if the enemy team has heroes that get in your face, as they're likely to end up between you and your tethered ally. This talent becomes more effective if you max tether early on. The additional movement speed talent at level 15 is more popular than the additional spirit hero damage. This is because currently most players don't level spirits early, instead they favor tether and overcharge. The movement speed talent provides a nice boost but doesn't significantly change your gameplay. If you're following the healer's skill build, the additional spirit hero damage isn't very useful. However, if you notice a slight lack in damage during pickoffs or teamfights, the spirit damage talent can be helpful. Players often choose the additional Overcharge max HP regen bonus over the Relocate cooldown reduction at level 20. The Overcharge max HP regen bonus is excellent for healing tanky allies if you're tethered to them. It's particularly beneficial in long teamfights where you can get 1, even 2 overcharges off. It essentially just lets you heal for even more, so if you're feeling like you need to output more heals, consider getting this talent. This talent is preferred because its impact is felt in most games. The Relocate cooldown reduction talent is situational but can be very useful in games where heroes are often spread across the map. Maybe the enemy is dodging you or you're dodging them. Being able to relocate for more frequent pickoffs or lane pushes can be game changing. The Attack Tethered Allies Target talent at level 25 is chosen more often for good reason. This talent allows Io to instantly attack the unit that its tethered ally attacks, enabling powerful new strategies at a critical point in the game. This talent pairs excellently with Gyro's Flat Cannon, Muerta's Gunslinger, and Medusa's Split Shot, allowing for multiple attacks simultaneously. Items like Daedalus, Desolator, or even Divine Rapier can be great for outputting high damage alongside your ally. Satanic for tankiness and regen while attacking to keep you alive. Even a Basher for occasional stuns, which can be crucial against BKB or debuff immune heroes. The additional health talent is useful, but the attack talent is much more unique and versatile, offering many new ways to play and push quickly. Most games will have a core that can fully utilize this talent, making it the better option in most scenarios. To wrap up, there are 2 main skill builds: the offensive build with Spirits for more damage output in fights and farming faster, and the defensive build with Tether and Overcharge for significant healing and ally buffs. Keep in mind that you don't need to stick to either of these. Experiment with different builds depending on the needs of your game. Next, we'll discuss the best item builds for Io and their reasoning, as well as the best neutral items. Io's strength is in keeping teammates healthy and buffed, which means you need to stay alive. The best items for Io are those that provide healing and survivability. These specific items and their order depend on the match, but here are some builds I recommend to give you an idea of what works and why. We'll go over a couple of popular item builds, then touch on some miscellaneous items that are great on Io, and wrap up with the best starting items. A popular build is Stick into Wand, 1 Bracer, Mech, then upgrading Wand into Holy Locket. From there, choose items fitting for the game like Glimmer Cape, Lotus Orb, or upgrading Mech into Guardian Greaves. Variations include 2 or even 3 Bracers or getting Holy Locket before Mech. This build provides early stats for tankiness, and your mech timing often aligns well with your teammates' key items like Blink on your offlaner or crucial items for your mid laner. This build helps you survive and win early engagements. Another common build is going Stick, possibly upgrading to Wand, then rushing mech. This usually gives you a 9 to 14 minute mech timing, which paired with a level 4 tether allows for a powerful early teamfight advantage. This build requires good team communication to rally and make plays on the map. Let your team know about your large healing you can provide so they can be sure they're safe when being aggressive. While effective, this build can be risky if your team doesn't play together or early fights go poorly, as you lack defensive items. This build is great for hitting early timings with your team, for example with a Huskar mid. Coordinate your mech timing with their armlet timing and push objectives aggressively to close out the game. Now for some more miscellaneous items to sprinkle into your build depending on the game. In general, people don't usually buy boots on Io because Io has no feet. Actually, it's because Io's movement speed matches its tethered ally if it's faster, so boots aren't usually necessary. However, consider arcane boots if your team lacks mana sustain, or upgrading to Guardian Greaves later for the self-dispel and freeing an item slot. Tranquil boots might seem appealing for HP regen and can be combined with drums for boots of bearing, but this is riskier and more team oriented. If you're not consistently with your team, other items might be more beneficial. Generally, you don't need boots on Io, but keep these options in mind for specific game situations. Urn used to be very popular on Io, but not as much nowadays. On paper, it can still be great as it provides some mana regen and of course the heals from its active. Typically, if an urn is picked up, it's intended to be upgraded to a vessel later on. Usually someone other than the Io will go for this item so Io can focus on other items to stay alive. Soul Ring can be great if you have a core who's very mana hungry, especially early on. This is often not necessary if at least one person on your team has arcane boots. Glimmer Cape is always a good and safe item to get. If the enemy has a lot of magic damage, or if you need a way to survive if being targeted, this is a great choice. If the enemy has high magic damage that can easily hit multiple enemies like a Zeus, and you're not too concerned with being targeted and killed, Pipe can be a great pickup. Drums to give your team a boost in early momentum when taking early fights or objectives. Lotus obviously for the dispel and if the enemy has single target spells, specifically large lockdown spells like Pulverize, Lasso, Fiend's Grip, or Dismember. A common item to get against IO is Vessel, as it reduces the healing a target will receive. Use Lotus on whichever teammate is hit by an enemy vessel to remove this debuff. Ghost Scepter if the enemy has a lot of attack damage, specifically against heroes who want to jump and blow you up quickly, like Phantom Assassin or Ursa. Pavis and Solar Crest to give additional buffs to an ally, specifically against high physical damage dealers like the ones just mentioned. Vlad's can be nice to get if your team needs lifesteal and extra damage. If no one else on your team is going Vlad's and your core could benefit from the lifesteal, consider picking this up. BKB if the enemy has significant magic damage and control. Aeon Disc is great against high burst damage, ensuring you survive their jump and can use your healing items to turn a fight. Now for your starting items. If the enemy will use a lot of spells in lane, I'll go for a Stick, 1 Tango, 2 Branches, Blood Grenade, and a Sentry. If they won't use many spells early in the lane, I'll opt for more stats to help with trading and denying. 2 Circlets, 1 Tango, 2 Branches, Blood Grenade, and a Sentry. You can turn these 2 Circlets into Bracers later on as well. If I predict the lane will be a lot more passive and the enemy has a lot of ways to harass us, I'll start with a Ring of Regen or even a full headdress. After the bounty runes, you can fly out more regen and another sentry if needed. Feel free to mix and match builds as you see fit. These are just some builds that I like going and that I see others go for as well. Now let's talk about which neutral items you should keep an eye out for. For tier 1, Seeds of Serenity for more regen, Trusty Shovel to dig up salves and mangoes, Bubble to be a bit harder to kill in early engagements, or Arcane Ring for a little mana buff if your allies are in need of it in the early game. For tier 2, Philosopher's Stone for more money, Bullwhip for the health and mana regen, and you can whip your tethered ally to speed both of you up. Light Collector for the health and mana regen, or Gossamer Cape against certain heroes who want to jump and blow you up. Stat items like Vambrace and Pupil's Gift can be nice to tank up a bit, or Dragon's Gill for the additional armor and health regen. Tier 3. Paladin Sword is great for the additional heal amp from its passive. Dandelion Amulet against high magic damage lineups, Craggy Coat against high physical damage lineups, Cloak of Flames against lineups with both high magical and physical, and Ogre Seal Totem or Doubloon to tank up a bit more. Tier 4. Ascetic's Cap, Trickster Cloak, Rattle Cage, or Aviana's Feather to stay alive, or Telescope if no one else on your team has one. And tier 5 is when things get crazy, so whatever's fitting based on the game and what your team needs. If you enjoy my content and want to support me even further, Patreon is the perfect way to do that. I offer coaching there to help you achieve your Dota goals. If you want to work with me on mastering IO, this is the way to do it. Check out my Patreon page for more information, link in the description. So you have all of the info on IO's skill builds, item builds, facets. Now how do you actually play IO? But not just play IO well. What's the overall game plan or playstyle that IO should have? Let's start with the laning phase, then move into how you should play the rest of the game. IO excels in lanes with frequent trades and fights due to its constant HP and mana regen. A lane partner with a stun, slow, or repositioning ability increases your kill potential, especially when paired with a blood grenade. At level 1, poke at enemies with spells and attacks, and prioritize securing range creeps. Hitting level 2 quickly can give you an instant kill opportunity using Overcharge and your partner's abilities. With IO's health and mana regen, go for another kill once your spells are off cooldown. Fairy Fire and Stick can be crucial for surviving early trades and securing kills. Pull as needed, but spend a lot of time in lane tethered to your ally to keep them healthy and ready to fight. Playing passively is not ideal. Be aggressive and go for kills when possible. Communicate your intentions and plan with your lane partner. If you're late on a pull, use this trick. Let a neutral range creep attack you, then tether to your creep. The neutral creep's attack will follow and hit you near your creeps, causing them to aggro the camp, saving the pull. It might take some practice, but once you do it a few times, you'll understand how it works. Prioritize the Healing Lotus at 3 and 6 minutes for additional sustain when going for kills. As the lane progresses, it might become harder to be aggressive. Look for opportunities as they arise and be aware of TP rotations to other lanes to help allies and potentially secure kills. A rotation from Io to heal up an ally, even if it's with a few stick charges, can easily churn an engagement. In summary, Io is great at keeping teammates healthy, as we've learned. So if the lane is passive and you're not utilizing the extra regen Io can offer, it's kind of wasting Io's potential. Make use of Io's strength by using spells and making trades with the enemies. In the later stages, Io's primary contribution is providing global presence and keeping teammates healthy enough to take objectives and teamfights. When not fighting or taking objectives, Io usually follows one of its cores, keeping them healthy and helping them farm faster. With the use of Relocate, they can easily join their team. A common way for an Io team to be split on the map is 3 and 2. Io and its main partner in one part while the rest of the team is in another. The 3 may be moving in to take a team fight or farming around each other to stay safe. If your team is planning on taking an objective where you know a team fight is inevitable, it's often more appropriate to have the whole team play together so you can stay for the whole fight rather than just the 12 seconds of Relocate. Having points where your team plays split and points where you all come together leverages Io's strengths, and you'll often do both at different stages of the game. Relocate allows your team to cover more of the map, getting the most out of it and always posing the threat of backup. Io's heals keeps your team topped off with health and mana, enabling them to take teamfights or objectives efficiently. In teamfights, your positioning is key. Stay close enough to your core to stay tethered, but not so close that you're easily targeted by the enemy. Strategically use your healing items. Too early and they won't heal enough. Too late and your core might die. Use heals when your teammate is getting low and the enemy is about to finish them off. This can bait the enemy into a bad position as they overextend for an otherwise sure kill. Don't hesitate to switch your tether target if another ally needs help. If you have Relocate available, use it to either bring an ally back to the fountain to heal or off to the side of a fight for a quick reset. This is especially useful if a teammate gets caught at the start of a fight. Remember, Io is a healer and saver. Stay alive as long as possible to fulfill this role. If the enemy takes you down, make sure it's challenging for them and that they pay the price for it. This is how to have the highest impact as Io. Now after all this talk about Io and playing with one hero for a lot of the game, let's talk more about Io pairings, which are good and the reasoning for their strengths. Io is highly reliant on its teammates. Alone, it doesn't do much except look cute and make weird noises. But with the right partner, Io can be an absolute menace. But what makes a hero a good partner for Io? A good Io partner can utilize Io's toolkit to elevate their impact. For example, back in the day, Io's Tether used to stun enemies, pairing perfectly with CK's Reality Rift. This hero combo was very popular because it synergized so well. Io plus Tiny is another classic combo. Tiny has low attack speed but high attack damage, and Io can provide the needed bonus attack speed. Io plus Gyro is also a great pairing. Gyro greatly benefits from Overcharge's additional attack speed and spell amplification. And if Io reaches level 25, this talent is a huge power spike. Io plus Marcy and Io plus Ursa are great because these heroes play at a really high tempo. With Io's Relocate, they can be everywhere on the map, getting kills and snowballing out of control. Many heroes can make good use of Io's toolkit in one way or another, but some combos are especially straightforward and powerful. Some other combos for similar reasons include Muerta and Luna. Very mobile heroes can be hard to play with as they might break the tether, but heroes like Monkey King, Slark, Slardar, and Phantom Assassin all benefit greatly from the bonus attack speed from Overcharge. Razor, Leshrac, Bristleback, these heroes can make great use of the spell amp from Overcharge, and Io's Shard, which grants a tethered ally spell lifesteal, making them even harder to kill. Let me know if you have a favorite Io pairing and why it's your favorite. Now let's go over which heroes counter Io and how to play against these counters. If you play a hero a lot, it's important to know which heroes are good against you and how to play against them. We'll go over some popular counters that many people find difficult to play against and some ways to deal with them as Io. Ancient Apparition with Ice Blast. This prevents the affected hero from healing in any way, which obviously counters one of Io's biggest strengths. Glimmer Cape can help to reduce Ice Blast damage as well as help someone escape while they wait for Ice Blast to wear off. Playing scrappy and spread out fights can help against Ancient Apparition as it'll prevent him from getting a big Ice Blast on multiple enemies. Doom's ultimate is similar in that it prevents a hero from healing. Glimmercape won't reduce the damage Doom does, but it can help your ally to run away. Using Relocate defensively, either bringing your ally to base or off to the side of a fight, can be good while you wait for Doom to wear off. Winter Wyvern's ultimate, Winter's Curse, is a strong counter since Io usually stays close to a core. Positioning is crucial against Wyvern, and you can even relocate a cursed ally to safety. Upgrading to Ethereal Blade or getting a Wind Waker allows you to save a cursed ally. Havas or Solar Crest can help by reducing the physical damage a cursed ally takes. Getting comfortable with the max Tether range before it breaks is key when playing against Wyvern. Heroes who cause a lot of chaos in fights, typically with large spells or multiple units such as Beastmaster, Brewmaster, or Razor. These heroes can damage and control you and your cores at the same time, making it hard to position properly. Against such heroes, focus on survivability items like Glimmercape or Ghost Scepter. You might still die, but delaying it even for a few seconds can give your team an advantage. Heroes I classify as hunters, like Nyx Assassin, Bounty Hunter, and Spirit Breaker, can be challenging for Io. These heroes make it risky to show in lanes or play far from your team, as they often rotate with others to set up kills. You can deal with this in a few ways. First, try to play more as a team instead of splitting up. Build team items that help your team stay together and take objectives, like mech, drums, or Vlads. This prevents the enemy from picking you off around the map. Second, if you must play split, ensure you have good vision to scout the incoming threats, and place Observer and Sentry wards together to see incoming invis heroes. As Io, consider building items to prevent being blown up if these heroes jump you. Early bracers or a Glimmercape can be very helpful. Using spirits when moving around can be helpful to scout threats since they hit invis heroes. Ultimately, every hero has a counter, and every counter has a solution. The more you play, the better you'll get at handling these counters through proper positioning, itemization, and strategy. My philosophy is, if you want to learn how to play something well, learn to play it against its counters. This will test you the most and give you a deeper understanding of your hero. Congratulations! You've graduated IO school. If you made it this far, put in the comments "I graduated" smiley face so I can spot the real ones. Thanks a bunch for watching. This was a big project for me. If you found it useful or entertaining in any way, I'd greatly appreciate if you gave this video a like. This helps me figure out which videos people enjoy, and it helps YouTube know if my video is worth pushing to more people. If you want to watch IO played live, come by my streams where I often play it, and you can ask me any questions you have. I love chatting with people about my games and love hearing when people come from my videos. If you want to support me further and even work one-on-one with me to improve your Dota gameplay, check out my Patreon. Thank you to Yuri, Mark, Aaron, Daniel, Ole, and Jay for supporting me there. Finally, join our community Discord server where you can chat with people about Dota or non-Dota related things and find awesome people to play with. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope you learned something new with me.